Good morning. Well, depending on where you are. Right now, it's good morning for me. It's late afternoon, almost evening for Christina out in Scotland. So we have a few different things that we had come up this week that I wanted to talk about. And as usual, please post any questions you have into the chat. And please let me know if there are any technical difficulties. I think we got mostly everything cleared up now, but if we didn't, then please post in the chat. Okay, so the first question was, what's your opinion on sourcing only from specific countries for certain types of products? For example, getting textiles only from India versus China, electronics from Asia versus Pakistan, etc. Okay, so one thing that you have to know about sourcing from different countries is that basically over the last 20 years, since the WTO basically removed a lot of tariffs, countries have started specializing. So basically what that means, if someone tells you they have an electronic item for you from Pakistan, that means it's probably not made in Pakistan. That's generally what that means. In fact, you probably wouldn't want an electrical item made in Pakistan because that's not really what they're good at, and there's not a lot of kind of institutional knowledge in that space in that country. Whereas there's a ton of institutional knowledge around textiles, around other kinds of handmade goods. So for example, we worked on a project a while ago for salt lamps. And the salt lamps are made from Pakistani pink Himalayan rock salt. And they actually imported the lights, the whole light fixture, everything from China to assemble it in Pakistan. So depending on what you're getting, you may actually not be able to get something locally made that way. You may have to get it from somewhere else. There are certain types of products that are only made in China now. There was one thing that we were doing, I forget for which client it was, but when I was working with BDA, there was a request to do a Made in America plush. And at the time, there was only one plush maker in the United States that could meet the demand for the volume we wanted. So that's a pretty huge challenge, actually, when you're trying to figure out which country to source in, is whether or not they can actually do it. So that's the first thing. Do they even have capability in country if you want to go with Pakistan or if you want to go with India or whatever? As far as sourcing from a specific country for other reasons, Amazon actually used to have a policy of not sourcing from Bangladesh. And part of the reason why is because it's virtually impossible for a factory in Bangladesh to meet Amazon's high responsible sourcing requirements. So by that, they have to have passing requirements around the building quality. You have to have passing requirements around the policies. And it was just impossible to find someone in Bangladesh that would meet that. And so that whole sourcing process was basically just like, no, we're just not going to do Bangladesh. We're just not going to take that risk. So I've actually been seeing some interesting stuff about people sourcing from Myanmar, which is pretty cool to see. We have similar issues there, though, because it was cut off for so long. There's a lot of kind of labor policy stuff that kind of hasn't caught up with the rest of the world. So that's another thing to keep in mind. It's not just about the product, although the product's an important part of it. It's also about, are you okay with that country and their political situation and the kind of building and labor laws that exist? Are you okay with that being associated with your brand? And as a new brand, you may not care that much, but as an established brand, especially if you have any sort of causes that are associated with your brand or some sort of charity thing that you do, then you may want to look into that part as well. The other question here was textiles from India versus China. And that is a total depends kind of question. So China is really, really solid and consistent with their textiles most of the time. It depends on the factory you're working with, but in general, when I've ordered textiles from China, they're usually really solid and they're really kind of piecework, just really good at this is my spec pack, this is my product, this is what I want to produce, and they're like, okay, and they make it. Now it's more expensive in India, but the problem with India is that it's so manual labor heavy. So I asked one time, I was at the port in Mumbai in India a while ago, and everything was being done by hand cart. There were no machines anywhere, and we were asking, like, what's going on? Why aren't there any machines here? And the port guy we're talking to from Expeditors said, well, I mean, the first thing is that there are a lot of people in India, and so it's actually cheaper to hire the labor than to invest in the equipment. But second, there are a lot of people in India, and we kind of need to keep them employed. So I found that fascinating. So one of the things that you have to keep in mind between India and China is that China has become very mechanized, actually. A lot of the factories are very advanced and very mechanically advanced compared to India, where it's still very much handmade. So if you're going to order things from India, you have to accept a certain level of handmade kind of variance. So for the items that we order from India, a lot of home textiles, we actually would kind of market them as more rustic, like rustic handmade variants, all this sort of stuff, to where people wouldn't get upset when they bought it and it wasn't quite exactly as the picture. That's another thing to keep in mind. Okay, the second question that came up this week is, how would I determine if my product line requires a more robust social media marketing campaign versus aggressive account management on Amazon? Okay, that's a great question. So what I see as the difference here is the awareness of your product type. So not so much the awareness of your brand, but the awareness of your product type. If you have a product type that's somewhat unusual, that's somewhat new, that is innovative in some way, you absolutely must have an off Amazon strategy. You just must. Because when people come to Amazon, they're usually coming to Amazon because they already know what they want. They're already what's called a qualified buyer. And so when they come to Amazon, they're typing in things, they're searching for the product that they think they already want. It's really difficult to kind of get exposure to new customers on Amazon for new products, like totally new products. Now, there's something cool that's coming up that might change that. But right now, if you have something that's totally new and you have something that really doesn't have a lot of market awareness and doesn't have a lot of brand awareness, you need to be on social media. You need to be on Facebook. You need to be advertising on Facebook with video to show how your product works, to show how interesting and cool and new it is. You need to be marketing on Instagram, running contests, basically doing anything you can to get out there and to be known and visible and what your new product and what your cool thing is. So for example, if you had a customized product that was completely brand new in your space, you could run a contest to see how people use it. You can do something where you say, all right, everyone, do this thing here, and you will be entered to win a free iPad or a free Kindle, whatever. Then you can have people who are then incentivized to post things to your Instagram, to post things to your Facebook. Then you can get them to develop the content rather than you. That can save a little bit of time there. It can also get more followers and get more engagement. The best one to do is when you have a follower and then you basically say, hey, you can be entered to win this, but you need to have 3 of your friends like my page too, or like your image on my page. And so you can kind of make it like almost like a network. What's that? MLM marketing, the Amway thing. You can use your friends to kind of have their friends boost your Instagram likes and Instagram page. So versus aggressive account management on Amazon, what works really well are things that already have some sort of traffic data. So things that people are already searching for on Amazon, then you can push through advertising, through coupons, you can push the rank of your product higher and higher on that search result. And so as long as there is some sort of demand for the product type that you have, then it's actually fairly easy to aggressively market and advertise on Amazon and start raising in the ranks. So if you're doing it without doing giveaways, which by the way is prohibited, people still do them, but they are prohibited. If you're doing it without doing giveaways, it takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months to raise the rank organically of a product from nothing to being on the first few pages. It depends on how low the price is. It depends on how aggressively you market, but that generally is how long it takes. So that's really the difference there. So if it's something brand new to the market, totally new to the world, then you may really need to overly aggressively focus on social media. And then if it's something that is something that exists in the world, just a new play on it, then going aggressive in on Amazon is sufficient. Now, I think that both is the best option if you can do that. And for social media, you can use promotion codes from Amazon to see how successful some of your social promotions are. So that can be really helpful too. Okay, the next question is, what are the best trade shows or conferences to attend during the year for newbie sellers versus more established sellers? Okay, that's a great question. So for newbie sellers, that depends on what kind of newbie seller you are. So there are a few different types of sellers, right? There's the RAOA, the basically arbitrage model, where you're looking at something that already exists. You're using the tools that already exist to determine if you have sufficient profit after Amazon's fees to justify investing in that product. It's basically just a numbers game. Is there enough of a gap between what you're paying, what Amazon costs you to make a profit? Simple. Okay, that's a pretty easy thing to do. I would suggest Ecom Chicago, Midwest Ecom, Rocky Mountain Resellers. Let's see, what's another good one? Yeah, those are the ones that I would say are probably the solid ones to go to if you're starting out, you're new. There's also Jim Cockrum's conference. I haven't personally been there, but one of our former business partners did, and she said that it was really solid in retail arbitrage, online arbitrage. So if you're trying to do something different, like wholesale or private label, then you need some more advanced techniques. You need some more, you need different vendors basically to work with. So when you're doing RAOA, you're usually using smaller vendors. You're usually using, comparison of prices from scanners. You're usually kind of using the tools that cost like $30 to $50 a month. When you're doing wholesale versus private label, you're generally speaking, depends on what kind of wholesale you do, you're generally doing a smaller catalog. And so you really need to go deep in on those products and really understand them. So sometimes you may be paying for something quite a bit more expensive. So for example, we pay for Scope. And that's a Seller Labs tool. It competes with other kinds of keyword search tools like Jungle Scout. There's a few others out there. So we like Scope just mainly because we like Seller Labs and how they run things. So because no one will tell you how they're getting this information, they won't tell you how they're estimating these keywords or how they're estimating this traffic. You really have to trust the algorithms that they're building behind the scenes. And so I know the Seller Labs guys. I know how dedicated Brandon is to putting out a really awesome product. And so we just typically use whatever Seller Labs puts out. So that's the difference there would be you would need to go to a different level of conference. I would say that if you're doing wholesale or private label, you have to go to Prosper. That's the don't miss show for the year. They just got bought out by a bigger conference company, so they're getting a lot of support from that parent company now to make a really awesome big conference. Then you have there's a couple other ones. Retail Global is a maybe. That one, the challenge there is that there's a lot of breakout sessions, and so there's also a main stage session. So you would have to, and then they don't record the breakout sessions. And so if you're going to go to like a Retail Global, I actually suggest going just to breakout sessions and then watch the main stage sessions after you get back, because you don't ever have the chance to go to those breakout sessions again. The problem is there's like 4 running at the same time, and so it's kind of hard to figure out what you're going to go to. But they have some really solid intel, and you can get the business cards of the speakers and talk to them afterwards. The other one that I would say was pretty good for wholesale in terms of finding suppliers, in terms of finding people to help you to succeed in that, was actually IRCE. I thought that was pretty solid to walk the floor and find suppliers. The difference with wholesale, the thing that makes you successful with wholesale is how you manage your logistics. So are you palletizing? If you're not palletizing, then you're losing money on every single thing that you could be making money off of. The difference between palletizing and not palletizing for one client was $1.10 average per product and 10 cents on average per product. For another client, it was about $1.25 per pound, down to 25 cents per pound. So the difference between palletizing and not palletizing could be a substantial business benefit. So you need to learn how to use Amazon's palletizing shipment, the LTL shipments, properly, not just the small parcel shipments. If you're going to do wholesale and be making a margin off of what somebody else is selling to you, then you're reselling on Amazon. You need to be able to make money in that space. If you're doing PL, You know, sometimes it may not be an Amazon conference that's helpful with PL. Sometimes you may actually want to go to an industry conference in your industry. One of the things that a lot of folks in PL miss is they're learning how to do Amazon, but they just started in this industry. They have no idea what they're doing with their product, actually. So we have people who are asking really basic questions about their industry that they just haven't ever been to a toy show. They haven't ever been to a home and garden show. They haven't ever actually seen how the established players go. So I would actually say that for PL sellers, you may not want to prioritize Amazon shows. You may just want to go to Prosper and then go to some of the other conferences in your own industry and get to know what the industry players are, join an association, get their newsletter, see what other people are struggling with in the industry, and learn from them. So I would say that's kind of, depending on what kind of seller you are, you may have a different approach to where you spend your conference dollars.
Kind of a side answer to that question. Somebody asked me a couple of weeks ago, what type of conference would we recommend for them to have a booth at? They are an Amazon seller, but they have, I can't remember the specifics of it off the top of my head, but one of the things that struck me is if you're newer as a service provider in the industry, find out where your competitors are going. Where are they displaying? Where do they have a booth? And where are they showing up constantly all the time? If there's something where they're going every year, or if it's an every 6 months type conference, go be and present where your competitors are going. Obviously, that's working for them in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, did you say Resonate on there? Did you put Resonate on your list, Rachel?
I did not, but that's a really good one to put on there. Yes, thank you for reminding me.
Yep.
Along with our whole Seller Labs thing. Yeah, and actually another example from Seller Labs, they actually, the first time that they went out and started doing the conference circuit a couple of years ago, did every single one they could find. Literally, that was their whole goal for that year, is to go to every single conference, learn about it, learn who's there, really do like reconnaissance on it, and then after that, only go to the ones that they thought were most effective. So if you're in any sort of similar kind of situation to Seller Labs, check out where they went last year. That means that those are the ones that they thought were most profitable. Okay, if there are not any more questions, then I think that we are done for this morning. If you have any questions that were not brought up during our session this morning, or anything else that you want to ask, please post in comments or email us at info@thinkcascadia.com. All right.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rachel.
Okay, all right, that's it. All right.
Bye. See you next week.